Percy versus the darkness. In the darkness, all Percy wanted was a glass of water. He was nearly choking on his dry throat. The heater was on full blast to combat the freezing temperatures outside. Percy managed to open his eyes enough to see his clock. 3:23 a.m. Another long night, and it was to be a long day if he couldn't get back to sleep. He shuffled through the junk on the floor as a blind man navigates a room that he knows exactly where everything is. If he ever had anyone sleep over, a dame for example, she'd be crashing through and tripping over everything. He had almost made it to the bathroom sink when the pain shot through him. Son of a... His pinky toe had caught the corner of the door jamb. Now he was awake. His eyes began adjusting to the winter darkness, and at that moment the heater flicked off. It was loud. It was old. Percy noticed it right away. He tried to hawk up the dry chunks of mucus that clung to his throat. Then he reached for the tumbler he kept at the edge of the sink. After downing a few gulps of water, he grabbed for the mouthwash to gargle. Whatever stuck in his throat, he couldn't get out. He tried to turn on the bathroom light. The switch clicked, but no light came on. "Damn," he said. The heater must have blown a fuse. He was not going to get back to sleep anytime soon. He downed another 2 tumblerfuls of water and then went to where he knew his desk to be. The drawer on the left wouldn't budge. He pulled, he rattled it, and in anger he banged it with an open hand. With one more vicious tug, it came out all the way, crashed to the floor. Mother... Percy bit his lip. No need to swear, he told himself in his head. But there was a strange and heavy fear that had come over him, like someone was there in the shadows, in the dark corners of his place, watching him, stalking him, and waiting to pounce. And he had another terrifying thought. What if the light never comes? And he shuddered before stuffing his hand in the fallen drawer in a kind of frantic panic, feeling for the flashlight that he knew was there. Where is it? Where is it? He looked back to his nightstand where the clock was, but no time was lit on it. Power was gone everywhere in the dead of the night, in the dead of winter. He shuffled through all the crap in the drawer, feeling paper clips, scraps of paper, markers, a stapler. Where was that damn flashlight? Finally, he grasped the cool metal cylinder. He twisted it one way. No, that wasn't it. Damn, being left-handed, he twisted the other way. That should do it, but nothing. Then he heard something fall in the kitchen. What was that? He wanted to say, "Who's there?" but instead took a deep breath. Why am I panicking? Was I having a nightmare before I woke up? And he felt the heaviness of the darkness. It was like being in deep water with the pressure of all that water on top of you. He banged the flashlight against the palm of his hand. It flickered and died. He made little twists and adjustments. Nothing. He was wide awake, breathing heavily now, swimming in deep water, in deep darkness. His ears felt plugged, which muted the sound around him, but now he could hear other sounds. Sounds from a different frequency, a different existence. And fear gripped him. Irrational, but there was an evil presence. He heard... Was that breathing, or was that the wind outside? Why was his mind playing tricks on him? He didn't take any cold medicine before bed. He wasn't even sick. But with his knees still on the floor, and with him still bent over the fallen desk drawer, and having discarded the flashlight back into that fallen drawer, he realized that he couldn't remember going to bed. He couldn't remember if he was sick or well. He couldn't even remember why he needed a good night's sleep, because was tomorrow Monday or a Saturday? He didn't know. Percy tried to take a deep breath, but choked about halfway, and his breathing became quick and shallow, and there was something in the darkness with him, and he knew that the darkness was not going to go away. He had been sleeping for years, he suddenly remembered. He woke up always, and only to darkness. And he always got some water and went back to sleep, and no, calm down, he told himself. He heard that breathing again. Don't ask him how he knew. It was the breathing of a dragon, and the evil creature that lived in the corner of his bedroom and that he just couldn't get rid of. And morning was never coming. The light was never coming. Were those his thoughts? How did he have those thoughts? Of course those were his thoughts. Who else's would they be? But he had read somewhere long ago about a theory that thoughts weren't internal. Your brain was like a radio, just a receiver. Nothing more, nothing less. Your thoughts, whether they were from your soul or from some broadcaster, came from a separate location from where your brain actually was. And with thoughts like that, how is he to ever fall back asleep? He picked up the drawer and put it on top of the desk. He would replace it when the light came, if the light came. And he heard that breathing again. In fact, he felt something like a warm, moist breath on the back of his neck. And he jumped and comically took a karate stance, which caused him to laugh away a tiny portion of his fear. Who goes there? Who goes there? The thought was inside his head, but whence it came. And now Percy knew that he couldn't go to sleep again, not until the sunlight came. He had fallen back asleep too many times. If he fell asleep this time, the darkness would crush him, or the dragon would gobble him up. In his bedroom slippers, he shuffled off to the living room. No lights worked here either, and he peered outside and saw no lights anywhere. It wasn't his fuse, but the power was off everywhere it seemed. Were his neighbors huddled in corners, wondering if the sun would rise too? Percy sat down in his armchair and stared at the deep darkness of the TV. His chest was tight, breathing hard, and out came a snarl. A wet snarl. Was that his or the dragon's? Who goes there? He repeated. But his voice was soft and weak from the sleep, and the darkness and the tightness of his lungs and throat. Where do his thoughts come from? His? My thoughts? Where do my thoughts come from? Thoughts and words, thoughts and vocabulary are closely related. The thoughts are my words in my head, but sometimes not. Sometimes the shameful ones are from somewhere and someone else. Take captive every thought. And that was not his idea, but it did enter his head. And the wet snarl was louder now. Percy shook, trying to stand, looking with his hands and with his mind's eye for something to grab as a weapon. A bottle. He always kept a bottle nearby to help him with his thoughts, his awakened thoughts. And he reached out with his left hand to the table that sat next to his armchair. The bottle was there. Heavy glass, almost empty, but still a little liquid sloshed about. If there was no immediate fight, he could down the little bit of liquid courage that was still left inside. By God, who are you? Percy stood and turned around and turned all the way around, seeing nothing but dimness and shadows. You're getting close, the voice seemed to say. Voice, not thought. Percy's knees nearly melted with fright, but his guardian angel must have been holding him up because he did not fall to the floor. He felt light in that moment, a dizzy lightheadedness where the heavy darkness had been. He was floating, and he felt safe, the heavy presence gone. Percy collapsed back in his chair and emptied what was left in the bottle. His eyelids heavy now, but he didn't want to fall asleep. He didn't want the oblivion of slumber or another dream or another nightmare. He wanted the light, more than he had wanted the water only a few minutes ago. He still didn't know the time or place he was in. If he went back to sleep, he would never know. Percy slapped himself on the face and bit the inside of his lower lip. He would stay awake to see the sun rise and the light enter his window. He thought briefly of going outside and braving the cold, walking to somewhere he didn't know, perhaps climbing a hill and seeing the sun come up in all its glory. But he thought he would be satisfied with its rays coming through his window. How long did it take for 3 hours to pass? If you say 3 hours, I'm going to punch you in the face. And he laughed because it was his thought, and his thoughts were funny to him, even if No one else got the joke, and he knew he had the candle somewhere, and maybe he could read the time away. Reading was something he once did. That was a memory, a real one, he told himself. But then he couldn't remember ever going to sleep, and then he started thinking, what if everything that's in my head and everything that's out of it, thoughts, memories, forgotten hopes, and dreams came from somewhere else and from someone else. And now he needed those candles. So he took a few steps to the kitchen and felt around more drawers, wondering if he really did have candles somewhere, or if that had been a phantom thought. And his breathing was tight and shallow again, and he thought, oh no, here we go again. And he remembered, or someone made him have a remembrance, that the candles weren't in the kitchen at all, but under the very table where the bottle had been, and was now again. He went back to the table, faintly perceived the candles with his squinted eyes in the dimness, and felt them with his hands. They were tea lights, which were good enough, and there was a lighter next to them too. He lit a few, and the flames made for beautiful reflections and refractions off and through the empty bottle where ideas and courage come from. The bottle, really, Percy admitted, was merely a talisman, or more accurately, a placebo. And shadows danced on the wall, but there was that corner that the light didn't touch. A deep, dark corner, and it was part of the living room and part of Percy's mind. The creature lingered there, Percy knew. How he knew? Percy let the thought float away. The dragon man with the wet snarl was in that deep, dark corner, but Percy was going to pretend that it wasn't there. Percy would read until the sunlight came. He shook a little and told himself that this was from the cold that was leaking in. With the heater dead and the world in the dead of winter, of course the cold would leak in. Percy looked to his shelves for a book to read, but they were empty, and Percy cursed under his breath at the false memory of him having volumes upon volumes of literature. And there was another shadow among the shelves, a spot, a shade darker than the surrounding area. Instinctively, Percy reached there and thought his hand might be sucked into a black vortex, but instead it rested on a book that was lying flat on the shelf. Percy took it and felt the soft coat of dust on the leather-bound book. He wiped it off and gave it a blow for good measure, and then sat back down. The black leather Bible was the only book that had been placed in his residence. But Percy wasn't religious. At least, he didn't remember being so. But a Bible wasn't always religious, especially a dusty one. At one time, and yes, where did this thought come from? A Bible is read by many as a source of history, of poetry, of literature, of truth, of good morals. Even men who denounced God had found something in it. Percy felt, and deeply felt at that such a time was long ago, almost in the time of fairy tales. How long did it take for that amount of time to pass? And the candle flames jumped once more. A cold wind was leaking in from somewhere, from behind him, from where the deep dark corner was. And it was foolish to keep the creature with the wet snarl behind him where he couldn't see it. But what else could he do? Percy sat, opened the book, and leaned towards the 3 tea lights on the table to his left. And the first line he read was, "Take captive every thought." Percy slammed the book closed. "Who's there?" Percy said to the deep dark corner. "Not me," the deep dark corner said. Percy reached out for the bottle, still there, still empty. A throaty snicker turned into a wet snarl. Percy looked back, but all that was there was darkness. The dragon man hid well, and Percy turned back to ignore him. He put down the bottle and picked up the book of forgotten lore. He opened to another part and read of kings and betrayals and redemption and fallings. Lost in the book, Percy did not hear the dragon man creep right up behind him. He almost didn't feel its moist breath on the back of his neck. But he did feel it and had no time or chance to pick up the bottle. He closed the book and held it with two hands. He turned and struck what he knew was there. In a flash, he saw what was both an ugly and beautiful face. He felt the Bible solidly connect with it. He felt such great triumph and the sting of such great sorrow, all at once, all in the moment. And then there was nothing there. The thoughts and memories fading like dreams do. This is no dream. The thought was solid no matter where it came from. I'm awake, Percy thought. Awake for the first time, it seems, and the sun is about to come up.